All right, folks, so I'm just going to read in. It's been a while since we've done a Zoom meeting, but I will read in the standard read in, and we've established that there is a quorum. So thank you, folks, for joining us on the January 13th Economic Development Commission meeting. This is a web-based call, and we're operating under the following procedures. The meeting is being audio and video recorded. Let me just let Eric Palmer in. Hang on just a second. Okay, there you go. A recording of the meeting will be available within 24 hours and will be posted to the Town of Waterford's Planning Department website. To ensure good sound quality, the default rule for the meeting is that folks remain on mute unless they're speaking. If an attendee creates an audio or visual disruption, then the Zoom moderator can place them on mute or remove them from the meeting if the disruption continues. We will not use the chat feature in this meeting. We appreciate your attendance, and should you have any questions about the process, you can call our staff at 860-444-5813 between the hours of 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. Monday to Friday. All right, it's all yours, Dan.
Thanks. So since this is our first meeting of the year, hope everybody had a nice holiday season and Happy New Year. Forgive me, since I still don't have an agenda in front of me. What's the first item?
First item is call to order appointment of alternates. We don't have any alternates and we do have a quorum. So after that, we have the approval of the minutes.
Anybody like to make a motion to approve the December minutes?
I will make the motion to approve the December minutes.
Second.
Okay, before
All in
we,
favor?
no, not yet. Before we vote, there's a couple of items on the minutes that I need to have corrected.
Ooh.
The, for the fiscal year 2023 budget discussion, I had mistakenly put in the rate of the consultant fee at $80 an hour. It was $200 an hour. Okay, so that change will go into effect on the well, will be recorded in these meetings minutes. So that one.
One
Yeah.
other thing on that, on the item that says Startup Micro Grant Program, E. Lusher, who was tasked with this project, was not present. Nothing new to report. I wasn't tasked with that project, but anyway.
Yeah, you must be reading my notes because that was my next thing. Over there.
Okay, yeah, I got two of those in there, but
Yep.
You were busy, Ed, and you didn't even know it.
Yes. See what happens when you don't show up. So, modification to the minutes of changing the consultant rate fee from $80 an hour to $200, and removing the line under Startup Micro Grant Program. Ed Lusher, who was tasked with this project, was not present. Those are the amendments to the minutes. Now you can make a motion.
I make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We have approved our minutes. I'm pulling into the driveway. Mark, would you tell me what's next on the agenda?
Sure. For commission projects and initiatives, other boards and commissions business of interest to the EDC.
So as folks are probably aware already, the cannabis moratorium that the Planning and Zoning Commission voted on went into effect on December 31st. So that is in place. It is in effect up to a year from the date of publication, which I think winds up being around December 17th or so of 22. We know that it's the Planning and Zoning Commission's intent to begin, sometime in the next quarter to discuss alternative regulations, location of potential elements, and how they might proceed with whether or not to permit cannabis establishments to open in the town of Waterford. I have been approached by at least one person asking me to create an email group for anybody who might be interested in following the progress of this, so they know when meetings are coming up or if we're posting materials. So I will start that. So if anybody in this group would like to be on it, certainly we'll keep the EDC as a whole informed. The other piece is that as we begin to create materials or any kind of presentations, we'll create a page on the Planning Department website where folks can go and get additional information about drafts or questions they need answered and that kind of stuff. So it's not happening right away, but it will likely happen well in advance of the expiration of the moratorium. On the 25th of this month, so there will be a public hearing for the accessory dwellings opt-out. This is an option to take a pause and a bit of a break from the legislation surrounding accessory dwelling units that went into effect January 1. And so that is something the Planning and Zoning Commission is holding the public hearing. Will vote that night on whether or not to opt out. And if they do choose to opt out or recommend that the town opts out, they'll be sending it on to the RTM. One of the things surrounding this is that the Planning and Zoning Commission is in the process of crafting replacement regulations that closely mirror the work that the state and Desegregate Connecticut folks put together in drafting that legislation under PA 2129, which does things like it just creates sort of more standard conditions for attached or detached dwelling units across the state. So that anywhere where there's a single family home allowed, an accessory dwelling unit would be allowed, and you don't have to be necessarily related to the person or people who own the home, or the primary structure to have the benefit of living in the accessory. So that is coming up. If anybody is interested, you're more than welcome to attend. That's going to be a virtual meeting as well until we figure out whether or not COVID is leaving us anytime soon. The last piece that I'll give you a quick update on Tuesday, the Planning and Zoning Commission finalized the scope for the plan of conservation and development update, and that has been approved to go out for advertising. So we're working with our purchasing agent now, and that should come out sometime in the next couple of weeks. And we're looking at a February-March timeframe to select a consultant and move forward. The commission will be the core managing sort of group and committee that does the POCD work, but they're going to be bringing folks in along the way. So the EDC was definitely one of the groups that was mentioned at the meeting, and there's a strong desire to have participation from folks on this commission as well. So that there'll be certainly structured time for folks to reach out and participate, and then anytime that there's a meeting going on, folks are more than welcome to attend. That's what I've got for now, and we'll go from there.
Could I ask a question, Abby?
Mhm.
On the cannabis, is there a specific person heading that up on the planning and zoning?
No, it has not been assigned to a particular person. Typically that we work between the chair and staff. When the chair is ready for that to start to come forward, staff will begin kind of drafting and focusing our attention there. We will start to draft in the meantime some of the location criteria, or sort of where under current regulations or potential concepts for regulations we may locate things. We've heard interest from both retail sales and micro cultivators. Those are the two that seem to be the most interested in Waterford so far. It should go through the chair.
So I noticed on the minutes from when they voted for the moratorium that they cited our recommendation didn't include, I think it was safety and something else. Do you remember?
So there's a health, safety, and welfare component that they're obligated to make a finding on when they vote on things like a moratorium, that in order to fulfill their charge of protecting the health, safety, and welfare of Waterford citizens through the zoning regulations, they have to make a finding that they need more time to evaluate the impact of the legislation on zoning and how it will affect the health, safety, and welfare.
So I'm just wondering who's doing that piece of this.
So that will be part of the conversation surrounding the regulation update. So there's not a particular point of research necessarily in play yet on health, safety, and welfare. Staff will do advising on that. So we'll pull together, sort of hear some of the, general statistics on, is there an uptick in crime or not if you, include one of these types of establishments. I think we need to temper it a little bit because Waterford only gets one of each, at least until 2024. And so, I think there will be some conversation from the police chief. There'll be some, others, traffic officer, that kind of stuff. There will be, other town officials that will weigh in, and then there'll be an opportunity for public comment and additional research to be presented. And then the staff job will be to organize all of that into a summary report for the commission to consider.
So I was just wondering if there was something that we should be doing to help you out with that, or, if you needed something from us for that.
It's never bad to have additional information if you have, sort of success stories, or, again, they know that you're sort of taking this from a particular point of view, but I think that, knowing what your the EDC's position has been, if you have ready research or know of information that you want to share with the commission, absolutely. What will probably happen is they'll go through a series of just sort of public discussions and listening sessions in which they would gather information, then craft a regulation, and put that regulation out for official public comment. But there will be sort of, I think it's important for the EDC to be involved in that crafting phase.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything you all think we should be doing on that, or? Eric, I don't know if you even had some information on that piece of it. It was just, I noticed that was something they cited for why they didn't, why they voted.
Yeah, and I mean, I can certainly look into, I'm sure there's research out there as far as the impacts of crime, and I've actually think I've read some stuff that supports that it goes down when you put an establishment like this in town. But I can definitely look into that. I'll have to look into like size towns, obviously, because like you said, we're restricted to one of each. So we wouldn't want to look at something from like a big city where the ratios are all different anyways. So I can definitely, I can check that out between now and the next meeting and see if I can provide any citable resources that we can pass along while they're considering all this stuff.
Yeah, I feel it's important just because they said that's something we didn't do. So let's respond to that and, just give them some update.
All right.
Is that our purview, health and safety? I mean, our purview
No,
is economic
and
development.
No, and it wasn't something that they said the Economic Development Commission didn't do. It was that they are obligated to make that finding as part of their vote to do the moratorium.
Well, I think, sorry, I thought the way that it was worded did kind of seem like it was something that we left out, or like that they were expecting from it. When I read it, that's what I got out of it too, Jill.
I did too.
Yeah.
Any
And maybe
other
that
comments?
maybe the offering correspondence to them, as soon as you're ready, will help jumpstart some of that conversation. And it's not a bad idea, perhaps for the chairs or for a representative from EDC to chat with Greg and just have a discussion.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is there a point of contact on this project for planning and zoning, or just Greg on behalf of the group?
It's him on the group. Yeah, it's right now things are kind of filtering through the chair, and then staff does support work in the background. So he'd be the best start to have a conversation about what his time frame might be, and then he and I can talk about when it's going to be on agendas.
Okay. Eric, do you want to continue to be the point on this? Do you want help from the rest of us?
Yeah, sure. I mean, whatever help you guys can provide, like you said, is your connections through the RTM. And maybe if you can just find out, like, if I'm going to be looking for research, if there's something specific that they need or are looking for, rather than me digging around and then providing them with something that maybe be half useful and half not. So if there's maybe any specific questions that's holding them up, or if there's anything that they are really they're up on the fence about, that I maybe could provide some context to, just so I know what I'm looking for.
Eric, do you need an intro to Greg? I've only spoken to him once, or Abby could connect you if helpful, but I don't know if you know him.
Greg, who?
Greg Massett is the
Masad.
chair of the planning. Yeah, he's the chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission. I can absolutely connect the two of you, and then he and I are setting up a time to connect early next week to go over the next meeting, and so we can talk about when you might want to see that on an agenda, and when he might have some time to chat with you.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, even if I just have a brief conversation with him, I think that would be help a lot. So thank you. That'd be great.
Perfect.
Anything else on cannabis? I did have a question on accessory dwelling unit. So do we feel as a group that the approach we took with cannabis was useful. Do we want to try to repeat that and issuing a policy recommendation on accessory dwelling units as far as their potential impact on economic conditions? Is
I mean,
everybody
I'll
familiar
speak-
with the concept, what they are?
Yeah.
Maybe as background?
I see this kind of dovetail into the whole noise ordinance Airbnb thing, as Airbnbs as potential use if it's not families living there. I can imagine that dovetailing. I don't know if it's necessarily a position that, we need to take a position on it. I mean, we're certainly, I guess, welcome to decide as a group, but I don't know. It looks a little messy. Maybe wait until it shakes out on its own a little bit, and then if we find it's appropriate to kind of make an injunction on it, then we should do so. But I don't personally feel a need for us to do that right now.
I'd agree. I'm a little conflicted that you can leave your house vacant for 9 months of the year, but you can't have someone else living next door. So,
I mean, I don't know what other folks think. I mean, do we think there is an economic benefit to doing this?
Well, I'd say with my experience in where I was before this in Asheville, North Carolina, there was a big push to build accessory dwelling units in people's backyards. It created a lot more access to housing closer to the city center for people who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford it. It created more sort of semi-urban density. It enabled more people to participate in the economy in ways they otherwise wouldn't. So I can see a path to economic benefit as far as a more equitable and accessible economy. But I also see your point, Greg, as far as some of the concerns about Airbnbs and other temporary kind of transience issues that people are unhappy about.
Well, I also think it would be maybe a different conversation if we were in a more urban municipality. Not necessarily taking position for or against it. I just think, I mean, you would obviously see economic benefit to having more Airbnbs, right? That means more tourism, more accommodation, more living quarters that are very competitive. I could say it's being beneficial in an urban environment more clearly than so here. Not saying, taking position one way or the other though.
one thing I would comment about here though is we are very lacking in hotel facilities. And just even having my son at the Coast Guard and all the families that come in from out of town, they're either having to go all the way out to Mystic or farther out to rent places. And so I know that just as a rule, they flood with Airbnb, and probably maybe is the same.
Unfortunately, we probably don't have too many drivers like that to support a hotel industry. Would be kind of my knee-jerk reaction. But you're right, like there's probably limited accommodation. People are going 20, 30 minutes away to find accommodation, in those surge type scenarios, which unfortunately probably few and far between.
But I think Greg's probably right. Let's let them flush it out a little bit before we jump in and tackle that. I'm not sure which way they're even thinking of going.
Right now, the conversation has been to support an opt-out unless there's compelling public intervention to sort of speak in a different light, or if other evidence is presented to them, in part because they want a little bit more design control over the accessory dwelling units, which the legislation allows for if we have design standards in place for single family homes already, which Waterford does not. And so some of the things that they wanted to change from the legislation, things like size or relationship to the primary structure, those kinds of things weren't things that were such a big deal for the commission in their conversations, but things like making sure that if it's a detached structure, that it's set back from the front facade of the house, that it's not as tall as the house, that there's some kind of architectural relationship between the house and the structure. So a lot of it was more design focused. They don't have a desire necessarily through this regulation to attempt to control who lives in the unit or uses it. it. The legislation as written doesn't automatically enable these units to be used for Airbnb or short-term rentals. There is, however, I think coming up fairly quickly, conversations surrounding short-term rentals that I think will sort of be part of a community narrative. I believe Ted Alencio put that into, is it in committee now? Dan, I think it is. There will be discussion separately on that issue. So what we have here is the creation of these dwelling units, and then there will be a separate conversation globally on what Waterford does relative to short-term rentals and whether or not these units would be eligible to be considered for them. So there's sort of a two-part piece to it. This is just, are they allowed sort of by right?
Yeah, I didn't mean to confuse the two. It's just, I see them being related.
They'll overlap. You're absolutely right.
And just for clarification, because my ignorance on it, is this only extends to strictly residential type properties? We're not talking about, there's no opportunity for somebody, if they're starting a small business, to use something on their property for their business out of this? It's strictly dwelling, not.
Well, there's nothing to say that they couldn't have a home occupation in that accessory dwelling, as long as it
Right.
met the home occupation criteria. But what you would get is on residential properties, you would get up to one accessory dwelling unit by right. It could be within the existing home or an addition, or it could be detached. But once you have one, that's all you get. And there's a sort of forming conversation now about whether or not there should be an agricultural exemption to this to support folks who may have a very large piece of property, want to have multiple family units, sort of for people, multiple family households living on the same property while they manage an agricultural property. So that's another piece that's come up that folks may want to, that the commission may consider at the request of.
Curious, who's asking for that? I mean, there's only a handful of farms, in my opinion, in the town. I mean, what's the situation? Are they looking to grow, or I don't
Well,
know.
it's so I with the exception of naming folks who have only had confidential conversations with staff to date about what they want to do with their private property yet. There's no application in, but there has been a question about whether or not this regulation could be amended to enable homes that are of the same size or similar size to the existing single family home on agricultural properties. So if you've already got a house, could you build another house if you had all the other standards of the regulations met, but you couldn't, for example, subdivide the land, or you couldn't go through some of the, you didn't have the dimensional ability to meet all of the regulations? Could you, if you're a farm, have a traditional sort of family compound kind of thing? And so that's, it's not fleshed out yet at all, but it is something that's been brought up as a potential exemption.
This might be a hard question to answer in a way, but like, how hard is it to subdivide a property in this town? Like, I guess comparatively to other towns in the area. I mean, is that like a real challenge? Like, if you tried to do it, I understand there's setback requirements and things that are in
If
place
you meet
for
the standard, it's incredibly straightforward as long as you meet the standards. But if
I
you
guess
have,
I was asking about the standards then.
yeah, if you have a property that may not have, for example, access on a public road, that has its driveway goes to a private road, and you want to subdivide out a certain number of lots, you may not be able to do that under the regulations. So those kinds of things. So you may not be able to have the right, if you don't have the right amount of frontage or that kind of thing. So there are standards. If the land itself simply doesn't meet them, then folks are kind of between a rock and a hard place.
Right, and this might be a way kind of around that.
Yep.
Well, that in a way sounds good.
So we'll see. There's a start of a conversation surrounding it. The commission basically said they're willing to listen to anybody who brings them that suggestion as part of their crafting of replacement regulations to deal with the accessory. So the way it would go is, if the town does opt out, the commission would quickly start working on replacement accessory dwelling unit regulations, because the ones we do have are really inadequate and confusing and not really up with the times. And so the commission, I think, would be moving on new regulations, and that agricultural element will come out as part of that conversation. And that'll be another time for this group to have the opportunity to really comment and be part of things.
And if they opt in, what goes in place?
Then the state statute as it's written, we basically word for word cut and paste that into our section of regulations. So we would delete the sections that we have and just replace with what they've done.
Right, the
Which I
state
can-
has
I can-
already established standards. For these accessory dwelling units. So like like Abby said, we would just take those standards or regulations. The commission was concerned about having some control and not going entirely by what the state standards are. And such, by exercising such things as setbacks in relationship to the principal building and things like that. But in terms of size, number of units, that's all been dictated by the statutes.
So I mean, what's kind of the consensus? We want to adopt the state statute to replace our situation?
The consensus right now, or the conversation that the commission has had leading up to the decision to hold a hearing to opt out, is that there is interest in opting out to be able to craft their own set of regulation that is very consistent, but not exactly matching the state statute. So some things like, the state statute says the accessory dwelling unit can be up to 30% of the area of the existing residence, up to 1,000 square feet. The commission would keep that under the conversation they've had. But the statute now says that you can have the height of a building up to the zone district standard. So it's generally 35 feet. Well, if there's a 35-foot house, you could have a 5-foot taller accessory dwelling unit. And folks were concerned that it just, the aesthetics might be kind of wonky. It also doesn't restrict folks. Say the house is set farther back on the property than it would be allowed to. And there's more room in the front yard that you could place a structure in. Folks could put the accessory dwelling unit in front of the single family home, and it wouldn't, so they wanted it to feel accessory and behind and sort of subordinate to. So those are the kinds of dimensional things that they're looking at to try to kind of preserve neighborhood character and fabric without going too far astray from the work that was done to enable throughout the state.
Right, and they were okay. Okay, I like where it's going, I think.
They're fairly minor changes.
All right, that's my facilitator's 8-second pause. Say we move on to item 2 on the call. Item 2 of the projects and initiatives. And this is basically another question to Abby and Mark. Are there any updates or news on the FY23 budget that we should be aware of? Questions, clarifications, needs for our input?
Not at this time. So you made the recommendation to approve. I have not heard of any reduction in that budget to date. So my understanding is that what the commission approved is what is being forwarded to the Board of Selectmen on February 3rd for consideration. That's as far as I'm aware of that. There hasn't been any other changes. So I will say folks are always welcome throughout the process to attend meetings. February 3rd kicks us off at the Board of Selectmen. I can get folks the Board of Finance dates. I typically send just sort of a general invite out to the chairs, or if you want to send somebody in your place or not, it's not mandatory by any means. But sometimes there are questions and stuff that comes up. So just a heads up.
Okay. Any other commentary on that point? If not, I will move to say, you won't see startup microgrants on the agenda because I haven't made any progress on that, and I apologize for that. But what is on here is the small business grant program. So Ed, do you have anything to share with the group on that?
Well, this keeps coming up every meeting, but in October, when I agreed to do this, I've had in the file since then what I brought to the commission and gave everybody a copy of, and then 3 days later, I got an email that said that this was being shelved until March. So, we're kind, it shows up in every meeting that nothing's getting done, but they told me that we're not doing anything until March on it, so I don't know what we're supposed to do. I mean, I haven't gotten any feedback from anybody on the sheets that I passed out, and I thought it was pretty thorough, but, you know, I'm glad to push it forward if there's room to push it, but, you know, but Rob said that we weren't gonna do anything with it till March, so that's the last I heard of it. Abby, do you know anything about that, or?
So my understanding, and Dan, correct me if I've got the time frame incorrect, but that the micro grants might have been pushed forward to be the program to start first, and
But
then
we were gonna start the micro grant program in 2 weeks, you know, back in October, and
Mhm.
but I got an email saying that Rob said to shelve this thing until March, and you know, so I mean, I don't know
He
what.
did. No, you're absolutely right. He did. And there was a subsequent meeting with Dan and the finance director and Rob and I, in which we sort of talked about, you know, do we have a clear sort of understanding and path forward of how to move these programs along? The thing that came out of that meeting was I thought twofold. One was the first selectman and the finance director would like to have, you know, more input and participation in the formation of whatever documents or program elements are crafted. So that was one major thing that came out of that. The other was that because of the ease of perhaps creating something more quickly, that the micro grant program might be the one to start with, and revamp the time frame of the rollout, but that might be a better one to go with earlier because it had a little bit less sort of consequence report backs and that kind of stuff. It was sort of an infusion of cash and some ways to show some difference being made. But I think the conversation was, you know, if we can get the micro grant element going and shortly follow up with the small business grants, then there would be support for that. And so I think what needs to happen next is the elements that you pulled together and then I had put something together previously, that perhaps we look at those things and the commission decides, you know, sort of how you want to combine and perhaps make a recommendation for some draft documents to run by the first selectman and finance director. And I can certainly help and support on that. But I think that's kind of where it left off, was that there needs to be some additional vetting as it gets formed. Is that accurate, Dan?
Who do
That
you
seems
want?
accurate. Sorry, Ed, go ahead.
Now, who do you want me to send this stuff to then?
I think right now, I think there's a good series of lists and questions for inclusion in application. I think it needs to get sort of formalized into the package of information that would be handed to an applicant, and a formal write-up of the process of how an evaluation, award, and reporting scheme would go. So I think what we need to do is basically have a program package that goes out that says, here's how we run it, here's who's involved, here's how we vote, here's the, you know, kind of the matrix and all the kind of stuff that you were putting together in that element. Here's how we do our reporting on the back end, and then here's the actual application that people have to fill out. Whether, you know, they'll access it from wherever, you know, platform they access it from, but here, you know, here's what it's going to look like.
Well, we have all the hard questions down here. I mean, for us to put this in booklet form or, you know, complete the process without the people that want the input, if Rob wants input and these guys want input into it, we ought to have all the data on the table so that they can pick out of there what they want.
So we can certainly take a look at what we've got, see if we need to refine anything, and just see if we can schedule a time to talk. That might be the next best step, so that folks feel like they're included at the very beginning, and then from there get some feedback and bring it back to finalize that package, and then give it to them for final approval.
Okay. Any other projects or initiatives I left off the agenda that anybody wants to discuss?
I just have a question on the small business grant. So I'm unclear as to what the next steps are, or Ed, if you need some help, what you would need.
I just need to know who the parties are that are gonna put this thing together. I mean, I came up with my thoughts and have them on paper, and you know, if other people want input, are we gonna get together something with this commission and send it to someone else? Or, you know, I really don't know what should be done next.
I think the discussion of the content, Ed, of what you sent around, to make sure there's no other questions or thoughts that this group has on that material, I can help you get it into a format for Dan, or for folks to, for Rob and to Kim, you know, to take a look at. And then I think we schedule a meeting and say, listen, you know, this is, you know, we want to talk about, and perhaps we combine it with a follow-up to microgrants. I don't know, Dan, what your time frame is kind of with that, but I know you had been waiting for some feedback from Kim. I'm not sure if you got that or not. I can check in with her there too. But I think there does have to be sort of a driving, I think this group would need to sort of drive the energy behind it to say, we're ready to meet. What do you think about this? Let's do the next thing. Because I do think it is a little bit stalled right now. And I would think that this group would need to be vocal about wanting to move it forward, and you know, sort of working with the first selectman and finance director to make that happen. So, and I'm happy to facilitate. I am happy to pull things together, to format, to, you know, schedule meetings, to sort of facilitate making that happen. I think what we want to make sure is that this group is all sort of on board with, and you know, has given its input into whatever is being presented to them as a potential, you know, sort of program.
So is it right to say, like, we need to have the application done, the write-up of it, and then what the process of awarding is?
Exactly. And we have a lot of those elements, I think, have been completed already. And I think really it's, you know, that plus the reporting matrix. How exactly will we measure the success of this program? At what intervals are folks required to give information? And sort of how do we report this back to the grant agency who's supplied these funds? So again, and again, this, you know, this program is a little bit different because we're looking at real property improvements. So, you know, we'll be working with the assessor to say, okay, what is the, you know, some of the reporting elements, maybe, well, the value of this property increased by X%, and therefore the grand list grew by $500 or whatever it is per year as a result of this $20,000 investment, or whatever, you know, whatever it turns out to be. But I think we just need a metric to say this was the, you know, sort of the impact, and this was the value added, and go from there.
Okay, so next steps would be you're pulling this together, or do you need help? What do you want?
So I will have time likely at the beginning of February to start crafting or just pull together. I think what would be useful, though, is if there's any additional feedback on the parameters that Ed put together, if there's anything else that you think should be included on an application form, in evaluating applications, and any of the criteria for how to award, those would be useful things to know if there's any additional information to include. So it would be, that'd be helpful. And then, you know, again, we had already pulled together, and I think we have some stuff in fairly finished format, and some stuff I think we just need to literally cut and paste into a previous document that we had done. So it's just, is there consensus in this group, I think, about what terms the program has, and, you know, how we're deriving what the grant award is? Do folks, you know, understand it? Do they agree with it? You know, what are the criteria by which you would want to judge projects? Do you agree with the types of projects that have been included? That it would be good to know that there's consensus when crafting something to present to others.
I think I should get these back into everybody's hands again so that they can, probably, you still have them? Okay, good. I mean, it's just a matter of what things belong there and what don't, how to arrange them and.
It would be great to get that electronically. I think for most of us, I realize there are some challenges with distributing things electronically. Could you, if Abby, if Ed sends a copy to you, can you send a copy to all of us so that we can
Absolutely,
edit it,
yes.
send it back to you, and you can send our edits to Ed?
Yep. And I'm also happy, Ed, if you need to, if you need help compiling all those comments, and if you want me to take a stab at just being the repository for all of this stuff and trying to craft a document that addresses everybody's elements and then send that sort of draft document back out, I'm happy to do that too.
Are we
that-
destined to meet by Zoom from now on, or are we gonna meet next month in person?
That's TBD. There hasn't been a call made so far from a policy perspective that demands it be in person or online. It's really each commission has the ability to decide. So that's up to you guys.
I will say, we just had a COVID update from the Mayo Clinic, and she made a comment that the East Coast is peaking right now and should see a dramatic decline with the rest of the US to follow. And February or March was her kind of date that everything should be much lower. So they're mirroring, she's taking it from the other countries that have already seen this huge spike and then a very dramatic decline after that.
Great.
All right. Any other commission projects or initiatives to discuss? We can move to town development project and permitting status.
Okay, you've received in your packets the development update project status report, and briefly, the first one, the 908 Hartford Turnpike, which is the apartments, 2 buildings, 40-unit apartment project. You heard from the project engineer. They're going to be coming down now and filing the signed Mylars. That was approved back in September. So now they file the Mylars on the land, gives them the go ahead. It gives our building department the go ahead to start reviewing plans and the applications to start construction. Station that I know of with DOT regarding some improvements that need to be made to the frontage. DOT had some concerns relative to one being the grade of the driveway off of Route 85, the entrance. And so they're working with DOT on that and making that portion of their project anyway compliant to DOT standards. The second issue I had on here was what we had already talked about. It was the temporary moratorium on cannabis. The third one is we had a kind of a plethora of regulation amendments that went through. And we have more to be proposed as well. But anyway, those regulation amendments also took effect on December 31st, similar to the cannabis temporary moratorium. The Waterfree Community Park Master Plan received an approval on December 14th from the commission. That approval was for a Connecticut General Statute, what's referred to as a CGS 824. What that means is any proposed to public property needs to go through a process first before they start applying for funding and before they start developing a site plan. The Planning and Zoning Commission is required to find improvements are consistent with the plan of development, and that's what the 824 is. And so the commission was charged with that, and they reviewed the application and found that that park plan and is consistent with the plan of development. So that is going forward. It says now site plan, generating a site plan application that would be reviewed by the commission. One is the large multifamily project that's proposed on Route 85, across from the intersection of Crossroads up on the top of the hill. 284 units are being proposed. That has been officially received by the commission on December 21st. It's a site plan approval. It's not a public hearing required for this. The plans are now under review by staff and all the various agencies. We will be scheduling that for a review by the commission and a presentation in front of the commission soon. I would say within the next 2 meeting dates of the Planning and Zoning Commission, this thing will be scheduled for. The accessory dwelling unit, we just talked about that as well. The opt-out proposal scheduled for public hearing scheduled for January 25th in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Just a couple of administrators. These are reviews that just come over the counter, building for building permit applications, and these are all just relative to commercial projects. 914 Hartford Turnpike, which is the Chamber of Commerce building. That's where they're located. There's also an insurance office in there, is converted into office space for a doctor, moving into that. 915 Hartford Turnpike, Pier 1 Imports, what was formerly Pier 1 Imports in the Waterford Commons Shopping Center. The Babe Ruth League has a short-term lease on that space, setting up pitching mounds and batting cages for indoor training for the kids that are involved in Babe Ruth, Waterford. And then we're continuing with the big lots going into the vacant Benny space, 40 Boston Post Road. Building permits have been applied for, and those are currently under review as well. Any questions on anything, just let me know.
Thanks, Mark. These are great updates. Appreciate the written form.
Any update on that farmer's cow and the Papagenos?
They came before the commission in December.
Well, they made their presentation.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, go ahead, you got it.
Nope. I was just gonna, they came before the commission in December for sort of an informal discussion. And so they have some feedback from the commission relative to pedestrian circulation, site design, location of trash, length of drive-through queues, that kind of stuff. But generally speaking, got very favorable responses. So right now they're going back and just kind of modifying their plans and making some tweaks. And our understanding is that that's in anticipation of an application in the coming next couple of months. I will check back in with Carlin and see, if they need anything from us along the way, but we left it with, they were coming back and, felt welcomed and were hopefully ready to apply.
Any other comments? Let's move to payment of bills. Anything this month, Mark?
No, there's nothing this month.
No bills, we're doing pretty
Any
good.
correspondence?
Nope.
Okay. Other business? Anybody have anything? I have one item I wanted to raise. When I agreed to take the position as chair, my intention was to stay in the role for about 6 months, and we're getting up toward that 6-month mark. Compounding my desire to raise this topic is that I was subsequently appointed to RTM and then won re-election. So my desire to manage my level of time investment in public service has become even more important for me. So I wanted to raise this topic, not to say I quit, but to say if there's anybody who'd ever considered wanting to transition into a chair role, let's talk. Looking at you, Jill, Eric, Greg, Ed.
Oh, my Lord. You're doing such a great job, Dan.
Thanks. That also, I think
I second
part of the
that.
other issue here is it might hopefully free me a few more minutes each week to work on this pushing this micro grants program across the finish line, and that I really would like to see that through to completion, because I think it could really have a lot of positive benefits for us.
I think you should just keep going for now.
I will. I will. For now. Okay. If there's no other business, I would like to see if anybody would like to make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Our shortest meeting ever. All in favor?
Bye.
Have a good night, everybody.
You too. Thank you. everyone. Happy New
Thanks.